At some point in your career, if you're a professional, you're going to be asked to give a speech. And if you're like most people, you're going to be absolutely terrified about giving a speech. I'd like you to show you how to do a speech and have it be at least enjoyable, maybe even to the people listening to it as well. The first thing that you want to do when you're asked to give a speech is run as far and as fast away as you can. No, just kidding. What you want to do is ask yourself, why am I going to be doing this speech? What's the purpose that I want to accomplish? Let's say that you're talking to other parents and this is going to be about a matter of safety for other kids. Great. Now you have an anchor. Now you have something to talk about. And once you do that, you want to know who you're going to be speaking to, what are you going to be talking about, how is this relevant to them? Because everything that you're doing is you want to talk about how it's relevant to them. Because if you don't connect to them, it's meaningless. They're going to get bored. Next, you want to find out how long they want the speech to be. I would prefer that you keep your speeches less than 10 minutes in length. And when I say that, you really, really, really want to edit your speech and write it out well and practice this maybe 10, 20, 30 times by yourself, videotape yourself, get comfortable with it so that the least important aspect is trying to remember your speech. You also want to have little note cards. Now, Teddy Roosevelt used to take his speech and he would roll it up in his hand almost like it was a baton, and he'd use that to go ahead and shake at people. You can do that if you want. There's better things to go ahead and do with your hands, but I want you to have your notes there, and your notes should be almost like a paragraph or a chapter heading, where you might say, let's say we're doing the speech on children's safety, guns in schools, and all you would say is guns, boom. The next one would be armed guards, boom. And so everything, you just want to be able to look at this in case you lose track. You can take a look down and glance at it and say, that's what I need to go ahead and mention next. Because sometimes you get up there and your mind will go blank and you forget about what you want to talk about. And so like, okay, what do I do next? And just having a little reminder there, go ahead and get you back on track. Next thing you want to do is you want to practice with the sound equipment. And I always recommend that you have a microphone that you're using, unless it's a group of less than 10 people. Why do you use a microphone? Because when you speak, you want to be able to lower your voice and use the power of your voice rather than always shouting at all volumes in order to have people hear you. When you're using a microphone, make sure that's set up so you don't have any squealing or popping or anything like that. You want to get there ahead of time and go over the sound system so that you really feel comfortable with the sound system. Take your thumb and your fist. You want to have the thumb at your nose and have the microphone be about the distance from your thumb of this hand to your nose, so that you keep your microphone about this distance away from your mouth. And then plant your elbow right here, plant your elbow there, so that you can move around, you can do whatever you want, and this elbow is going to always be in the same spot, and your distance is always going to be about the same distance, so your volume on your microphone is always going to be steady. Now with this hand, you can go ahead and motion and maneuver and gesticulate and do whatever you want. But with this hand over here, you want to always keep that so that you're about the same distance. You want to have this point right here be steady. So no matter what happens, you always keep the same distance. Just a little hint. While you're doing that, you want to remember that this is a performance. And so whatever you're doing, you don't speak in a monotone tone of voice. You want to go ahead and have inflections. You want your voice to rise and to fall. And you want to be soft. You want to be loud. You want to go ahead and really have people listening to what you're doing. most important thing. Everybody, I guarantee you, everybody in that room is desperately, desperately, desperately wanting you to not be boring. Why? Because most people, when they accept a speech assignment, what they do is they're nervous about it, they don't practice, they don't prepare, it's not relevant to the audience, they stumble on the words, they're hard to listen to, and it's just painful to listen to most speeches. If you do this right, what will happen is people actually want to hear you speak. They will want to hear your stories. Now, I don't want you to ever give a speech. Wait a second, we're just talking about giving a speech. What do you want people to do? I want you to tell stories. Nobody wants to hear a speech to be spoken to. They want to have a story told to them. They want to have the story be relevant to them. They want to have a hero. They want to have a villain. They want to have romance. They want to have comedy. They don't care about facts and figures. If you have facts and figures that you have to use, incorporate them into a story so that people hear the story. They're not listening to a chart where you're reciting facts and figures about what happened with the budget last year and what will happen with the budget next year. Don't do that. Make it interesting. Next thing you want to do with everything that you're doing, you want to tell people, this is what we're going to do. This is how it's relevant to you. And you'll know when we're finished because this is what I'm going to say. I'm going to let you know it's going to be about this long. So you tell people what's going to be happening and you bring them in. And I want you to ask questions. Do you mind if people ask you questions? You don't have to answer them from the floor, but if I ask you a question, would you like to go ahead and hear the story about what's going to happen next? Suddenly, you're drawing people in. You're not quoting facts and figures. You're telling them a story. You're asking for permission. Now, as you start asking these questions, these are rhetorical questions, and hopefully you're not going to have some rube out in the audience respond and go ahead and start raising their hand and say, oh, I want to answer that question. But what they're going to do is they're going to mentally, they're going to become engaged. They're going to be listening. And you start asking questions. Would you like to hear a story about what's going to happen next? Suddenly, they're just like little kids again. They get really involved in this, and they really want to hear about what's going to be happening next. As you start doing this, you're telling stories, you're drawing these word pictures, you're drawing people into the audience and telling them the story. I want you to go ahead and always make sure you talk to at least 3 or 4 people in the audience ahead of time and use them in the story, in your speech, in your stories, so that you say, I was just talking with Jimmy over here, and Jimmy was saying that his kids are not eating enough food. Jimmy, I really doubt that. And suddenly what's going to happen is that people are going to laugh, they're going to go ahead and respond to Jimmy, and what will happen is you draw them in. If you can make this relevant to people, they will get involved. Finally, when you're ending the speech, tell people what you just told them and give them a call to action. If there's going to be a vote on something coming up, if there's going to be, if you want them to go see a movie, whatever you want to do, you weren't just telling them stories. Now's your time. If you want this to really be effective for you, I want you to take action. So you always need to have a call to action, even if it's just go home and visit this website. Once you're done, thank people for their time and get off the stage. You want to be brief, but don't go too fast. You want to take your time and establish what you want to hit and then get off the stage. And again, I would prefer that you try to keep this under 10 minutes and practice this and practice and practice. When I used to do these dramas, what I would do is I would practice this 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 times to the point that it was almost boring for me to go over these lines. And I would do this at full emotion, full intensity each and every time, so that when I actually was up there on stage, I could come down a little bit on my energy level and I would still have a lot of animation. Do that and people will think, wow, that was a great speech.